things to mull over in our minds, for sure. But so we have in the second day, we have the sky formed, and then in day 3, we're seeing other things go on, right? So first of all, day 3 starts with the waters being gathered into one place, and then dry land appear, right? So God's forming seas and land. What do we know? What do we think, I should say, what do we think we know about the earliest form of the land mass on the earth? What was it like? It was all... It could have just been one. If you look at the shifting of the tectonic plates, the scientists like to do those computer models and go back, and they're all one. And you can see how they kind of fit together, actually. Like that, there could have been a time when all land was one large, just gigantic land mass, and then the oceans were all just one gigantic sea. That's possible. What could have happened to separate all those things?
Could be a bad cataclysm took place.
Some sort of cataclysmic flood, perhaps, maybe, could have done that, right? It's possible. It's possible. We don't know. But it is fairly certain that after the flood of Noah, the environment of the planet was drastically changed. Drastically changed. We're going to see here in the opening chapters of Genesis how there is no rain that falls. There's a mist that arises and waters the earth. And that goes on until the flood. That's how things are. So it's like that for quite some time, actually. It's very interesting to look at that. Okay, so God gathers land into one place, gathers seas. He sees it is good, right? So creation's still good. Then what does God do? Verses 11 to 13.
Then God said, "Let the land produce vegetation, seed-bearing plants and trees on the land that bear fruit with seed in it, according to their various kinds." And it was so. The land produced vegetation, plants bearing seed according to their kinds, and trees bearing fruit with seed in it according to their kinds. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening and there was morning, the third day.
So the third day is busy for God. Okay, right? I mean, he's forming land, he's forming seas, and then once there's dry ground, what is God able to do? He plants stuff. He makes stuff grow, right? Vegetation, plants yielding seed, and fruit trees bearing fruit in which is their seed, each according to their kinds on the earth. So according to their kinds. We're going to see this repeated down the road as well. This is an important phrase. What does this possibly mean, according to their kinds? What do you think that might mean?
Well, it could mean that it all just didn't get started by some random spark in a primordial soup of nothing, and everything all of a sudden having kinds and species and genus and phylum and subphylum.
Oh, you're using all those.
I believe in creation than some stuff like that.
Yeah, there's those wonderful Latin scientific words, right, about how we classify things, and we would argue, Christians have long argued, that this creation of things according to their kinds does not mean that every single specific species was created at this time, but that their general order of classification, the kinds of things, this is when they came into being, and that over time you would have various species be offshoots and outgrowths of these various kinds of things, even in the plant world. Right, so does this mean that there were, beef eater tomatoes and Roma tomatoes and cherry tomatoes and grape tomatoes all right at the beginning here? Probably not. What does it mean? There were tomatoes. Okay, there are tomatoes.
Easier for them to go to the garden, stop and pick off their tomato plants.
That's right. They could go pick and eat whatever they wanted, right? Good stuff, right? So that's kind of what it's getting after here, okay? And we'll see that, as I said, repeated later on in Genesis as well. And God sees that this is good. So when dry land appears, then what does God do? He doesn't like a blank slate for long, does he? He's got to fill it. Fill it with stuff. Fill it with good things. Fill it with life. Fill it with growing green vegetation, with flowers. Right? Just can you think of the explosion of color that would have happened at this time? Like just green and purple and red and yellow and orange and all the colors of the rainbow and beyond. Just an amazing thing, right, that we see going on here. So there's the beginning of the vegetation. So plants and vegetation, they come first. And that's, again, the ending of the third day. Of course, what do plants need to live?
They need water and they need light.
They need water and they need light. They need the sun. They need photosynthesis, right? So what does God create on the fourth day? Verses 14 to 19.
And God said, "Let there be lights in the expanse of the sky to separate the day from the night, and let them serve as signs to mark seasons, days and years. And let them be lights in the expanse of the sky to give light on the earth." And it was so. God made two great lights, the greater light to govern the day, and the lesser light to govern the night. He also made the stars, and God set them in the expanse of the sky to give light on the earth. I lost my place. To govern the day and the night, and to separate light from darkness. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening, and there was morning the fourth day.
So God's really busy on day 4, right? He is making, what's he making? The lights in the sky. We call them the stars. And then he also makes the sun and the moon, right? Now the interesting thing is, put this in the context of the ancient world. What are some of the gods that were being worshipped at the time that Moses wrote these words down? You'd have had sun gods, moon gods, star gods. And what does Moses say here? Yeah, our God made those. Those things that you guys are worshiping, the one true God, our God, the Israelite God, yeah, he made those. And it's really funny, like you kind of see it here in the English translation, but the Hebrew, it's really kind of clear where it says in verse 16, God made the two great lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night, the sun and the moon, right? That's, we know those. Oh, and the stars. It's like, yeah, those stars, those things that you guys were, yeah, he made those too. I mean, it was no big deal. He just made them and he put them up in the sky and that was it. It's really kind of easy for our God to do these things, So this whole thing is almost like a polemic against a lot of the false gods that are worshipped out there, right? You can even see that in the previous day too, when God makes the vegetation, right? What are a lot of these gods made from? Wood. Stone. Yeah, our God, yeah, he made those too. He made that too. The gods that you carved out from wood and stone, yeah, our God made that wood and stone. You guys are worshiping the wrong things here. Come, hear about the true God. Hear about the one who is the ultimate power. And God has a plan for these lights that are in the sky. What do they help us do? Not only do they, they help the plants grow, obviously, photosynthesis and stuff like that, but what do they do for us specifically? What are some of the things that he says here? What are these lights, what are they for?
It's a mechanism for time.
It's a mechanism for time.
Seasons and so forth.
Yeah. Let them be for signs and for seasons, for days and for years. So here we have God giving us these things so that we can live in time and keep track of time and understand time. In fact, the whole creation story is, how long does it take? How do we reckon it?
6 days.
6 days plus 1 day of,
Rest.
which equals what?
7.
7 or 1 week, right? Like God sets it the order of the week here in creation. You ever wonder why it's a 7-day work week and not a 5-day work, or not a 5-day week or something like that? It's because of this. This is the way God ordered creation. He did it for us. It's a wondrous, marvelous thing. And that's what these lights are for, right? They're there to give us these things so we can keep track of the signs and the seasons, right? And remember, I mean, we have a lot of air pollution in the sky now, and we have light pollution, if you want to call it that, where because of street lights and stuff like that, you can't see the night sky as vividly as you could have back in the ancient world, right? I mean, we think the sky is brilliant at times. You go out to Arizona or whatever, and you look at that sky, that is brilliant to be sure, but we have to go far away to find those kinds of things, right? That's what it was like everywhere in the ancient world. You could see these things, just brilliant lights in the sky. And there's a reason why they were always looking at them, charting them, seeing how things go, right? They could chart the progress of comets and all sorts of things. These ancient people were no dummies. They were smart, and they were keen observers of the world around them and of the cosmos itself, right? I mean, how is it that the pyramids were constructed? And don't the pyramid corners line up with the cardinal points of north, south, east, and west, like exactly? I mean, it's just astounding. How did they know how to do that? Right? Well, by charting things. Like they were keen observers. They knew what they were doing, right? South Americans, the Incas and the Aztecs did the same sort of thing. So interesting stuff. Okay, let's go on. Or any other questions on the day 4, where God finally creates the sources of light? So we've had light for 3 days, and then God gets around to making the sources of light. I love that. I just love it. I think it's so funny. I'm gonna ask God, why'd you do it that way? That's so interesting. Is it just to say, yeah, I can? I can do what I want. I'm that powerful. I don't need sources of light to have light. I can just speak it and there's light. I'm giving you the source of light because you guys need that. My creatures, you need that. I don't need that. I mean, it's just astounding. It's wonderful stuff. So that's what happens on the 4th day. Then what happens next? Verses 20 to 23. Day 5. What happens there?
And God said, let the waters swarm with swarms of living creatures, and let birds fly above the earth across the expanse of the heavens. So God created the great sea creatures and every living creature that moves, with which the waters swarm, according to their kinds, and every winged bird according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. And God blessed them, saying, be fruitful, and multiply, and fill the waters and the seas, and let the birds multiply on the earth. And there was evening, and there was morning, the 5th day.
Yeah, so the 5th day. Okay. So we've got the seas formed, we've got the dry land formed, we've got the plants on the dry land formed, we've got the lights now in the sky to give us time and a sense of all those kinds of things. And then God says, oh, there's the waters. Well, we need to fill the waters. We need to fill the waters. So we're going to fill the waters with swarms of living creatures. What are those? What living creatures are in the waters? Teams, groups. Fish, eels, whales, dolphins, who knows? All those things, right? They burst forth, right? Again, abundance of life. And then, but God says, oh, I got the sky too. I should fill that with life. How's he going to do that? Well, I'll make birds. Birds can have fill the sky with life. And so swarms of birds fill the sky and fly. You get a sense here that God, like he started off with creation, remember, it was formless and void. It was empty. And what's God been doing ever since? Creating, filling it up, right? Filling it up. He doesn't like emptiness. He likes things to be filled, and not just filled with any old thing, filled with life. Filled with life. Ours is the God of the living. He's not a God of the dead. He's a God of the living. And so he's filling his creation with life. So God creates the sea creatures, every living creature that moves, which the waters swarm according to their kinds. be it plankton or whales, right? God creates those things. And then all the winged birds according to their kinds. All the winged birds, whatever those may be, right? Ostriches, penguins, vultures, hawks, eagles, whatever. He's creating them all, right? And God saw it was good, and then God does something different. He hasn't done this yet. He's going to speak directly to those things that he's created, right? So God blessed them, the sea creatures and the birds, and said, "Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters in the seas, and let the birds multiply on the earth." So God gives them a word of blessing. Be fruitful and multiply. What is he allowing these creatures to participate in? His act of creation, right? We call it procreation, right? He's allowing his creatures to participate with him in the act of creation. He's allowing his creatures to participate in the act of filling the earth with life. Again, another gracious thing. God doesn't have to do it that way. He chooses to do it that way. And he does so out of his grace. Right? It's just astounding to see God blessing them here. These are the first, this is the first explicit blessing in the entire Bible. It's the first one. Okay? And we know, so we go back to verse 3 where God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. God speaks and it happens. So when God speaks here, "Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth," what happens? They are fruitful, they multiply, they fill the earth. That's just the way it is, right? Again, looking at this, would there have been any such thing as barrenness in pregnancies, difficulty with conceiving in God's first creation? None of that. God gives this to his creatures, and they fill the earth as he said that they ought to. It's amazing. By pronouncing this blessing, God grants the power of procreation to the very animals that he had just created, right? This granting of procreative powers to provide for the ongoing welfare of his creation is a demonstration of God's loving care for his creation. That he allows us to participate in this way. That he has a way of that creation will continue to sustain itself. It won't just all disappear, right? That it'll continue to grow, and it'll be filled with more and more life. Just amazing stuff. Okay, then verses. We got like 9 minutes here. I don't think we're going to finish all of chapter 1 today, guys. That's not going to happen. Actually, that being said, why don't we stop there? Day 5, because day 6 there's a lot going on there that we're going to want to dig into. So why don't we stop there at day 5, where God has created the sea creatures and the birds, and then we'll get into day 6, which is really interesting stuff going on there for next time. Any last questions or comments on Genesis 1 verses 1 to 23 thus far? Okay, good. Well,
we understand it all.
you understand it all. It's perfectly clear. It all makes perfect sense. No, and we do take exception to sadly all too many Christians who would deny the basic fact of creation and go along with evolutionary theory and shove God's word to the side. That's not how we're called to live as Christians, is it? We're called to say, God's word says it. He's clear. I believe it. Do I fully understand it? No. Do I need to? No, I don't. I just need to take God at his word, right? And as we've said about Jesus so many times before, he died and rose again 3 days later. We'll take him at his word. When somebody else does it, then maybe we'll believe them. But until that happens, we'll stick with Jesus, right? It's good stuff. Can't go wrong with that. So let's close with the Lord's Prayer, shall we? Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.